Happy New Year's Eve. At least that is the day that I am recording this video. In part one of my video review of the Wheel of Time TV series, I talked about the reception of the show, the casting and the actors, the challenges of the production, and it might seem as if I was giving that show a pass because I like the actors and I acknowledge that the show had quite a lot of challenges as an adaptation, including being filmed during COVID. But if you stuck with my review through the end, I also noted that the show fails to build a logical world and tell a coherent story with stakes that are comprehensible to an audience, whether or not they have read the books. And that's a pretty major critique. In this video, I want to spend a lot more time on the characters as well as on the plot and whether the Wheel of Time TV show succeeds, more or less in telling a enjoyable, decent, comprehensible story. I also want to cover themes, but I'm going to have to do that in a part 3 video because the script for this video is already way too long. I'm dreading the editing that I'm going to have to do after I have finished filming. So here we go. This segment will include some spoilers, but really only small ones as I lay out the initial arcs for the characters in the books as well as the abilities that they have closer to the beginning of the story, the things that make each individual character unique and interesting within a fantasy world. Personally, I don't think that's the kind of information that will ruin reading the story for anyone that hasn't picked up the books yet, but if you don't want to know anything, you have been warned. Before we get started, I'd also like to thank everyone for your likes and comments. I now have over 1,000 subscribers, and I am very, very pleased by that. I don't know how long that typically takes if I'm doing well or not doing well, but I feel like having hit that milestone means that I need to up my game a bit when it comes to content production. So, in this video, I am going to attempt to add visuals, and I don't know how it's going to go. I'm doing my best, so we will see. Let's start with the characters. Part 1, the characters. So one of the things that I really love about the Wheel of Time book series is just how polarizing the characters are. Like, if you go to any online Wheel of Time community, you will see people saying that they would be perfectly fine if Faile was cut from the TV show adaptation because she is just the worst character and everyone hates her. And then someone will chime in and say, Faile is my favorite character. Her romance with Perrin is one of the best arcs of the story, and I would be so angry if she was cut from the show. They absolutely can't do that. And that is true of absolutely every character in the Wheel of Time. I know people who just think that Matt is the worst character, people who love Iguain and can't imagine any character better than her. There are people who love Elaine, people who hate Elaine. No character goes unscathed without somebody who just thinks they are the best and somebody who thinks that they are the worst. They're just really, really polarizing characters. None of them are universally loved. And I think that's a really neat part of the Wheel of Time. All of these characters at times think, say, or do really stupid, selfish things, but they are also really capable of great sacrifice and incredible feats of heroism. And different people are going to be drawn to different characters based on their personality or backgrounds or what their actual character arc is, either because it's similar to some challenge they've had in their own life, or they just happen to like that type of character or that type of story. And I think that Robert Jordan does this very intentionally. I can forgive a lot of bad writing when the characters are good, and the book series does not have perfect writing, but the characters are so enjoyable that it makes up for a lot of things that are not perfect about the way the books are written. And the TV show theoretically can do the same thing. If they nail the characters, the show can be very enjoyable, even when the plot doesn't always make sense or when there are things that happen that shouldn't be possible or where there's backtracking that needs to be done. If we really love these people and what they're doing, it can be a fun, enjoyable ride. And the show does capture a lot of what makes the characters great. but it does make a lot of changes to the characters as well, and not all of those changes have proven to be for the better, at least not so far in the series. So I'm going to take a look at the main cast, the original 7 that ride out from Emond's Field, and we're going to take a look at how those characters are portrayed in the books, and then also how they are portrayed in the show, and whether or not the show so far is doing a good job of capturing the essence of that character, or potentially giving us a version that could be just as enjoyable, even if it's different. And we will start with Moiraine and end with Rand. The Wheel of Time TV show does understand that the characters are important to an audience enjoying the show. Just take a look at this interview with showrunner Rafe Judkins on Gizmodo. Rafe Judkins: way more people have read Wheel of Time now than had read Game of Thrones when that show came out. And they really stuck to those characters and trying to tell the story of these characters in the television medium. That's what I try to do as much as I can with Wheel of Time. If we stick to the core things that made people fall in love with the books, hopefully, new audience will also be able to love them. So we do make changes, but a lot of them are to bring a fresh audience and let them understand this world as they watch these episodes. So what we're going to look at here in this next section is whether or not Rafe Judkins makes good on creating characters that are similar to the characters in the books, and or if there are changes, that those changes are bringing in a fresh audience to help them understand the world as they watch these initial episodes that tell the story. Let's start with Moiraine. Moira Damadred is a lady from a fallen house. Actually, she's from the disgraced loyal line of Cairhien, although she is not directly in line for the throne and has actively avoided being positioned for it. As soon as she learned that she could channel, Moiraine went to the White Tower to become an Aes Sedai. As accepted, she and Siuan Sanche overheard Katara Sedai give a foretelling that the dragon had been reborn. Because of this, she dedicated her life to finding him. Personality. The 5 words I would use to describe Moiraine's personality are serene, secretive, intelligent, wise, and devoted. When I say serene, I mean that Moiraine almost never loses her cool. She gets a little snippy sometimes, but rarely. The show captures this aspect of her personality. Rosamund Pike is very talented at emoting through her eyes, while the rest of her face remains blank. This is very effective for portraying a character like Moiraine. There's even a scene in episode 2 when Rand yells at Moiraine and she gets a little huffy. It's about the only time she loses her cool. This scene is very in character for both Rand and Moiraine, who have difficulty communicating. Moiraine is serene because she's an Aes Sedai. Moiraine is secretive too. She instinctively hoards every scrap of information she has because it's an advantage to her. She has to fight her better judgment to give away information when it doesn't improve her position. This is why she struggles with Rand, who expects her to be more candid, especially with him. But Moiraine knows no other way to live, so this is difficult for her. This is what episode 6 of the TV show is meant to demonstrate. The direction in this episode is actually pretty good, but it would have worked a lot better if the conflict hadn't been so nonsensical. In the show, the other Aes Sedai are obsessed with bringing Moiraine down for no clear reason. Making the heart of that episode a dispute about Moiraine's personal business doesn't work on a number of levels, not least of which because Moiraine should not have been stupid enough to put herself in that situation. Episode 6 would have been a lot more effective if the dispute had centered on Logain and maybe word of Taim rising as another false dragon and having the Aes Sedai argue about what they would do with a real dragon reborn should the wheel spin him out soon. As it was, the party gained nothing from going to Tarvan, so it doesn't make sense for the conflict to even exist in the story. Moiraine is supposed to be a really intelligent character, like crazy intelligent. In the books, she is shown to be highly observant and highly informed, as well as quickly able to discern what information is worth her time and what is discardable. She does this to such a degree that she is one of the only characters in the whole series who seems capable of comprehending what the pattern seems to be doing. In other words, she is aware not just of the pieces, but also the board they are being played on. This is so strategic that she is one of the only characters capable of outwitting the Forsaken. Moiraine is also highly educated. This isn't exactly a personality trait, but she should be a source of authority in a world cluttered with misinformation, especially when it comes to the prophecies of the dragon, which has been so integral to her life's mission. However, in the show, Moiraine does not come off as highly intelligent or highly educated. She never mentions the pattern, does not explain the prophecies, questions whether she knows anything, and doesn't really seem to have a plan for what to do with the Dragon Reborn after she finds him. Rosamund Pike plays her character as intelligent, but the unclear plotting by the writers lowers her credibility. In the books, Moiraine is also wise, which is different from intelligent. Being wise means having good judgment. In the books, Moiraine knows what to do in almost any situation. Her judgment also tends to be moral, with the careful weighing of values and outcomes. Although she doesn't always disclose why she makes the decisions she does, Moiraine is a good person. She prioritizes the safety, health, and emotional well-being of the people under her protection. We do see wisdom for Moiraine in the show also, but there are some scenes where she seems to act out of character, such as allowing the ferryman to die when it seemed utterly avoidable. In the books, he just runs off into the night. This change is intended to demonstrate that Moiraine cannot lie, but the writing is clunky and interferes with the understanding of her character. Moiraine is devoted to her cause. Her intention, almost universally, is to prepare the world to survive against the Shadow. She is capable of stack ranking what matters most and sacrificing what matters least, which makes her formidable because her mission always comes first, even over the lives of herself or the people who are under her protection. Motivation. Moiraine's motivation is to defeat the Shadow and save the world from the Dark One. That's it. Her loyalties are not divided. She is not a character in conflict. Even the people she loves and are sworn to protect are secondary to her mission. Her own life is secondary to her mission. This single-mindedness arguably makes her a bad protagonist because she knows everything and isn't conflicted. She serves much better in the role of mentor. The only trouble Moiraine has is trusting people, and this makes sense. She is wiser and more intelligent than almost everyone around her, and her upbringing and education make it difficult for her to be straight, even with the people she trusts. The show does capture Moiraine's motivations for the most part. However, the writing stumbles where Moiraine's mission is concerned because the lore of the Dragon Reborn and the Dark One is just so murky. Making Moiraine the protagonist in a mystery drama also lowers her credibility because she should be able to piece together the most likely candidate for the Dragon Reborn if any of the prophecies are the same in the TV show that they are in the books. I would also argue the injection of Moiraine's romance with Siuan interferes with the single-mindedness of Moiraine's character motivation. Those scenes with Siuan do humanize Moiraine. We get to see her unguarded when they're alone, with some lovely acting from Rosamund Pike. It's forgivable if you really love that pairing, but her actions in Tar Valon can also be viewed as stupid and indulgent. Personally, I prefer Moiraine paired with Tom Merrilin, the Grey Fox. It's probably my only one true pairing from the Wheel of Time, despite that their romance takes place almost entirely off-page, but it might take a whole video to explain that, so we won't get into it now. Skills and abilities. Moiraine is a powerful Aes Sedai. When it comes to channeling, she excels at healing and weather. At times, Moiraine almost seems overpowered, or at least it's not explained when she needs to use that sarangrial she's carrying around to achieve certain feats, which apparently can be used by anyone. Moiraine also excels as a counselor. However, she has to work hard at not being controlling. When it comes to politics, Moiraine knows what she is doing better than almost anyone. Although not likable herself, she understands how to make someone else likable. And in the books, she wants to help Rand become popular in the eyes of the people because that would presumably help him in his mission to bind the nations together in order to fight the Dark One. However, he won't listen to her, and it's part of the conflict that keeps those characters from working well together. It's part of the pattern, though. Moiraine's arc in the books is to accept that she does not control the pattern. It's a difficult lesson for her. In the show, her arc is less clear. It's really unclear what she is even trying to do, although it's only been one season. I'll add that Moiraine losing her ability to channel at the end of season 1 is a little annoying because it potentially drops her into the counselor position by default, rather than being something that she has to bend her neck, check her pride, and learn how to do like she does in the books, but I guess we'll see. Here is her description on the website, and I don't think it's that far off for who Moiraine is in the books. I score the adaptation of her character mostly faithful. Given how well Rosamund Pike plays her, I'd like to give her at least a 4 out of 5. The problem with Moiraine's character is that weak writing related to the lore and the plot makes this intelligent, strategic character seem unintelligent and foolish, which might drop her rating to a 3 out of 5, or even a 2 out of 5 if you're not very forgiving. I'll cover this in more detail in my video about the plot. Next, we have Lan Mandragoran. So, who is Lan? I would describe Lan's personality in the books as honorable, devoted, controlled, and stoic. It's important to note that Lan is not an emotionless character. He just has a lot of control over his emotions. He tells jokes in the books, even in serious situations, such as when the Amerlincy is looking for Rand and Faldara, and after the Bubble of Evil scene in Tyr. The show, however, leans even more into Lan's softer side, showing the audience that Lan is a complex person, not merely a tough guy who was there to defend Moiraine. Lan's motivation is to fight the Shadow until his last breath and to support and protect Moiraine as her warder. However, in the books, he slowly shifts his allegiance to encompass the Edmund's Fielders. This is partly because of his feelings for Nynaeve, but it's also because he knows that these people are the world's best hope to surviving the last battle. In the books, Lan is described as having trained exhaustively to become a living weapon against the Shadow, that he has held a sword nearly from the cradle. To defeat the Shadow and thereby avenge his homeland is his singular purpose. He becomes Moiraine's warder because they share the same purpose. He expected to give his life to this fight. He never expected to fall in love with a wisdom from a small village. It is pretty clear that Lan is a powerhouse of fighting ability. He is a blades master with the sword, but he is skilled in all combat types, and in the books he helps the Edmund's Fielders learn to use their weapons. He also has warder abilities, including stealth, stamina, and the ability to recover faster than men not bonded to an Aes Sedai. In the books, he has a color-shifting cloak like all warders. In the show, however, his garb is just camouflaged. Lan's initial character arc is to just help Moiraine find the Dragon Reborn. This aligns to his motivation to fight the Shadow until his last breath. He also uses his combat abilities to train the Edmund's Fielders. In the books, he teaches Rand and Perrin to use the sword and the axe respectively. Mat already knows the bow and quarterstaff, and he learns to use knives from Tom, not from Lan. Lan is particularly drawn to help Rand in the books because Rand favors the sword, and because Lan suspects that Rand is the Dragon Reborn, which would make him the champion for the light against the Shadow. We don't get any of this in the show at all, unfortunately, and given that all the characters are separated at the end of the season, with the Horn of Valir already stolen, it doesn't seem possible to have Lan train the boys at the beginning of season 2 either, but I guess we'll see. We do get Lan's romance with Nynaeve, but it's portrayed a little differently than I remember from the books. Lan in the show is, still driven by honor and duty, but he's a softer character overall, which some people don't like. They do a good job of showing his devotion to Moiraine, though, and portraying Lan as a character with layers. Unfortunately, Lan does not train or mentor any of the Edmund's Fielders. He barely has any conversations with them. After crossing the Terran, Lan and Rand even glare at each other pretty malevolently, and that's about it for their relationship development. Lan's romance with Nynaeve is decently handled, especially in episode 4, but it's a little confusing what his intentions are when they sleep together in Faldara in episode 7. He doesn't tell her he can't commit to her until after they sleep together, upon which Nynaeve cries, and this makes Lan look less than honorable. I don't mind the women having agency to choose sex partners without stigma, but it just seems out of character for Lan. It seems out of character for both of them. I didn't hate the morning sequence in episode 5 either, or at least not as much as some people do. Although a bit much and unnecessary to the plot, it seemed within the realm of something Lan would do as a ritualistic duty, if such rituals are actually part of this world, which we just kind of have to accept that they are. There are some scenes that bother me more. There is a scene in the first episode where Lan finds evidence of Trollocs in the woods around Emond's Field. Mutilated sheep arranged in the shape of a dragon's fang. You know, because some Trollocs are artistic. Lan talks to Moiraine about leaving before the Trollocs attack, which makes it seem like they were just going to allow the attack to happen on Emond's Field if they had identified the Dragon Reborn before then. This seems fairly out of character for both Moiraine and Lan. Lan should have said something like, "There are shadow spawn in the woods. We need to protect the village. They won't be able to defend themselves." Because, you know, that's what all Borderlanders would do in this situation, but especially Lan. The worst thing, though, about Lan in Season 1 is that he doesn't do much after Episode 1. He mostly just tags along with the party. It would have been great to get some fighting sequences for him in those last 2 episodes, and to see the Borderlanders not only welcoming him with like a clap on the shoulder, but rallying around him. We might be able to fault COVID-19 for this, like maybe they intended it but weren't able to show it. It's hard to say. I do love Daniel Henley's portrayal of Lan though, even if it's a bit different from the books. I would say his character is a 4 out of 5 in terms of a faithful adaptation, but it could be determined as low as a 2 out of 5 if you really hated that morning scene. As a character separate from the books, I would say Lan is defined. He has a layered personality and he's interesting, with only occasional wobbles that seem out of character. So again, I would rate him a 4 out of 5. Alright, let's talk about Nynaeve Almira. Nynaeve is the wisdom of Emond's Field. She's also a wilder with potential to become the strongest channel the world has seen in over 1,000 years. 5 words to describe Nynaeve are proud, passionate, judgmental, stubborn, and insecure. As a side note, just a heads up, all of the Emond's Fielders will be described as stubborn. All of them. Nynaeve's motivation is to protect her people, to get revenge on Moiraine and thereby win Lan, to heal anything, to stop being afraid, and to dispense justice. Nynaeve's character and motivations change little throughout all 14 books in the series. In contrast to Iguain, who I'll cover next, Nynaeve is just unshakable in who she is. Some hate her and some love her, but she is unapologetically always herself. She refuses to change, even to become Aes Sedai. She never even attempts to become Serene, but instead wears her feelings on her sleeve and does what she thinks is right, even if it goes against what the White Tower would want. She is outspoken, sometimes tactlessly so, and she absolutely hates being weak. Nynaeve is the opposite in Moiraine in many ways, and thus can't stand her. Whereas Moiraine is measured and wise, Nynaeve is judgmental, often ironically without wisdom. She ascribes all kinds of evil intentions on Moiraine, and is very unfair in blaming Moiraine for everything that happens to the Emond's Fielders. She's also a bit jealous of Moiraine and constantly pits herself in competition with her, even when it doesn't make sense to do so. Some of that is because she loves Lan and is emotional toward Moiraine being an obstacle to marrying him, but Nynaeve is also just generally insecure. She was constantly questioned as wisdom because of her age, and although she pretends to have it together, she second guesses herself a lot. Although her healing abilities are very strong, her leadership skills are notably weaker than she thinks they are. Nynaeve seems to think that leadership is getting her way through force of personality. Nynaeve is supremely trustworthy though. Rand trusts her because she doesn't play at subterfuge. She's not even really capable of subterfuge, or at least she is disinclined to pretend that her intentions are something other than what they are. She's also too proud to ever give up or give in, which results in some really heroic moments for her. Of course, this personality quirk also makes it impossible for her to surrender, which is why she has such trouble channeling despite being so strong in the power. Skills and abilities. Nynaeve has an array of distinct skills. She insists that her knowledge of herbs is relevant even after learning to heal with the power, and this does prove to be true from time to time. She also has the ability to track, which her father trains her to do in the books. I included bullying as a skill because Nynaeve thinks it is a skill. She often remarks that she has the ability to get stubborn people to do what she wants, even when they don't want to do it. Nynaeve is also a powerful channeler with powers similar to Moiraine's, except she refuses to believe that there is anything that cannot be healed. Nynaeve can also listen to the wind. In the books, this is described as channeling, which some women just pretend they can do, but it also works for Nynaeve as a kind of rudimentary foretelling. Based on observation, listening to the wind in the TV show seems to be an ability to sense shadow spawn, and both Nynaeve and Iguain can do it. For example, Iguain hears the wind right before the Fade arrives in Edmund's Field in episode 1. Both she and Nynaeve hear it again before the Trollocs attack the village. Iguain hears it again right before they encounter the Fade and are driven into Shadar Logoth. Nynaeve's arc in the books is to accept that she's not the wisdom of Edmund's Field anymore, and that her destiny is to become an Aes Sedai. However, she wants to be her own breed of Aes Sedai, and she wants to learn to heal without limits. The description for Nynaeve in the show is accurate to her character in the books for the most part, but you could argue that the writing portrays her character a little inconsistently. She seems to oscillate between demure and obstinate, sweet and self-righteous. This isn't the fault of the actress. I love Zoe Robinson. I think it's more the direction from the showrunners trying to make Nynaeve tough on Aes Sedai, but likable as a love interest in scenes with Lan. I think they worried that Nynaeve would be unlikable to audiences if they didn't show two sides to her. I mean, Nynaeve is unlikable in the first book, but I would have preferred a consistent portrayal of Nynaeve. I'd like her to always come off as who she is, passionate, brave, and prickly, with Lan just loving everything about her, thorns and all. Nynaeve does have many sides to her character, but I don't necessarily like that she shows Moiraine her prickly side and Lan her sweet side. I want her worst and her best blended together and people just understanding her differently. In the books, Lan falls for Nynaeve, I think, because she is so unlike most Aes Sedai. Nynaeve always does exactly what she feels is right without humility or apology. She wants everyone to see her as strong, Lan especially, but he sees everything about her, including her weaknesses, and how hard she works to overcome her insecurity. He's attracted to that. He understands her. In the series, Nynaeve and Lan are more just like two attractive, nice people who seem to like each other. Although I love this pairing, the relationship in the show isn't that interesting outside of Moiraine being an obstacle to their getting together. But you know, it's not that much of an obstacle because they hook up within a few episodes, and there's no reason they couldn't just continue to do that, especially with Moiraine having been supposedly stilled at the end of the season. The problem I have with this is that it doesn't seem like something either of them would do, because how proud and honorable they both are, and it's the commitment that's impossible with Lan bonded to Moiraine. It also relieves the tension way too soon. A lot of what draws an audience into a romance is the will they, won't they, and in the show, they will fairly quickly. I don't hate it though. I am enjoying Lan and Nynaeve's story for the most part, and I enjoy Nynaeve on screen a great deal. Unlike the other characters of Edmund's Field, she gets to shine, literally, in season 1. So overall, I think Nynaeve is a pretty good adaptation from her character in the books, at least a 4 out of 5, maybe a 5 out of 5, and her character outside of the books remains strong. Next, let's talk about Iguain al'Vir. In the books, Iguain is Rand's childhood sweetheart, who everyone assumes he will marry even though they fight constantly. She's also the daughter of the mayor and studying to become wisdom until she learns that she can channel, at which point she decides to become an Aes Sedai instead. In 5 words, I would describe Iguain as optimistic, adaptable, determined, stubborn, and reckless. Iguain's motivation is to learn everything possible and achieve everything obtainable. She wants to become an Aes Sedai more than anything else. She's also morally invested in fighting the Shadow. Iguain's abilities in the books include channeling, dreaming, and dream walking. In later books, she also shows a proclivity for politics. In book 2, Iguain shows an aptitude with earth when it comes to channeling. In the show, she shows an aptitude more for fire, but we might get earth next season. Both fire and earth are typically stronger with men in the books, giving Iguain an interesting advantage over other Aes Sedai. Iguain also has prophetic dreams, and later learns that she can dream walk. Iguain's initial character arc in the show is to learn to control her ability to channel. Iguain is born with the spark, which means she will channel whether she wants to or not, and must be trained in the one power so as not to hurt herself or others. She also has the strongest potential for channeling than any living Aes Sedai, with the exception of Nynaeve, and later Elaine, who we haven't met in the show yet, but is on par with her potential. At the beginning of the story, Iguain's arc is to cast aside her ambition of marrying Rand, or becoming Wisdom, to embrace becoming Aes Sedai. She is not really in much conflict with this in the books. She does it really easily. In the show, everyone thinks the light shines out of Iguain. She is the first Emond's Field character we meet. The show opens with her being inducted into the Women's Circle, and we meet the boys at her celebration afterwards when the whole village applauds her great achievement of floating down a river. Iguain is portrayed as someone with more suppressed ambition in the show, however. It's harder for her to let go of her future with Rand because he is so sweet to her. We're also apparently supposed to think that Iguain is the most likely candidate for the Dragon Reborn, I guess, because she seems to want it the most. I can see why Moiraine would want it to be her, and not just because it would be a lot easier since she could be trained in the tower and wouldn't go mad. But I don't think audiences really picked up on this direction. You have to know more about the world and her character to plug in the gaps in the narrative. I mean, there are 5 candidates, and Iguain doesn't really do anything that special. She's just the most positive and respectful of the bunch to sit out with Moiraine. In the books, Iguain is more adaptable than actively ambitious. She's like that person in your corporate office who keeps getting promoted despite having only middling successes. Mostly, she manages to survive a series of reckless risks. But she's moldable to whatever position she's given, and she's really enthusiastic about the company mission, whether that's becoming a Wisdom, a Tinker, an Aiel Wise One, or an Aes Sedai. So people in power tend to take a shine to her and think she'll make a good leader. She also has an almost fawning respect for authority figures, which can arguably be viewed as manipulative on her part because she wants to convince them to teach and mentor her. This is captured in the show, but really subtly. For example, she's the only one to look at Moiraine with reverence when she does her melodramatic entrance in the Wine Spring Inn. But Iguain has Two Rivers blood. Secretly, she is stubborn and reckless. Despite how loyal she pretends to be to whatever cause she's been tapped for, she's always thinking about her own advancement on the side. Iguain wants to know everything and to control everything. She just lies about it convincingly, even to herself. In a way, she's a natural politician. The show's portrayal of Iguain leans harder into her wanting more than a quiet family life in the country with Rand. They even show a nasty half-healed cut on her arm in episode 1, which is not explained in the season, but made me wonder if she hurt herself on purpose or on accident. Like, maybe she cuts herself because she feels so constrained by her life in a small village. I know, dark. Or maybe it's just evidence of her being reckless. Anyway, Iguain yearns to escape Emond's Field the most out of all of the characters. She also gets to be the strong one when escaping the White Cloak encampment in episode 5, while Perrin is shown to be indecisive and does nothing to protect himself or Iguain. We'll get into his characterization next. Overall, I would rate Iguain's characterization in the show as mostly faithful. We haven't seen everything she can do yet, and the show has not yet highlighted her negative qualities, but that might be coming in future seasons. She does seem like a defined and interesting person, and there are some hints that she might not always be the bright, upbeat girl we're led to believe she is in season 1. Although I would have liked to have seen more development for Iguain, and really all of the Emond's Fielders, I'm going to give Iguain a 5 out of 5 for character development. Now, let's talk about the boys. Our poor, underdeveloped, underappreciated boys. Let's start with Perrin. Perrin Ibarra. Perrin Ibarra is the childhood friend of Matt and Rand. He is described as stocky and strong, and he is apprenticed to the Luhans as a blacksmith in the village. I had to think about Perrin's personality in the books carefully because it's done differently in the show. I would describe Perrin as protective, meticulous, practical, stubborn, and self-effacing. Perrin is not interested in glory or leadership, but both are thrust upon him in the books. He views himself as a simple man with simple needs, but he is the type of person to notice details. Despite thinking himself simple, he is attracted to complicated women. He also likes to work out how to systematically solve complex problems. He has an aversion to shoddy workmanship, and in the modern world, he'd probably be an engineer. Perrin's motivation in the books is to protect and defend others, especially the weak. Perrin knows he is strong, and although he is described as being overly careful so as not to hurt anyone accidentally, he can be brutal when roused. Perrin is concerned with preserving his humanity, as he is afraid that his connection with the wolves will turn him into an animal. Perrin also wants to stand up for himself and to do what is right. He has a strong sense of right and wrong, and although he likes complicated people, he dislikes duplicity. Like Rand and Matt, Perrin is Taviran in the books. He is a blacksmith's apprentice and chooses the battle axe as a weapon, and later a hammer. He can also talk to wolves, which comes with some other interesting abilities, such as enhanced vision and the ability to smell emotions. Perrin also has dream-walking abilities, as this is associated with wolves in the Wheel of Time. Perrin is pretty quiet in the first book of the series. He is shaken by the revelation that he can talk to wolves and that he murdered some White Cloaks under the influence of the wolves and in their defense. In the second book, he takes on some responsibility, and in the third book, he starts being more confrontational. The first half of the story overall is about Perrin developing his confidence and leadership abilities. In the second half of the series, the pattern assigns Perrin the most difficult problems to solve, such as what to do with the Dragonsworn, the Shaido, the Swanshan, and the White Cloaks. These groups are all fanatical in different ways, and it's left to Perrin's steady mind and solid morals to puzzle out how to neutralize these threats. Perrin in the show is really different. It's tough to say if the showrunners didn't understand his character in the books, didn't like his character, or have just decided to tell his story differently. They seem to be latching on to gentle and careful as Perrin's overarching character traits rather than protective or problem solving. But then they have him lose control and accidentally murder his wife in the first episode, so, not that careful and gentle. This incident leaves Perrin unhinged for the entire first season of the TV show. The only indication we have that Perrin is a blacksmith in the show is when Nynaeve notes that, quote, "iron is hard to work alone," unquote, and sends Perrin to go check on his wife Layla, who seems to be the real blacksmith. We get no sense of his meticulousness or craftsmanship at all. I should note that Perrin does not have a wife in the books. He does think in one casual aside that he might have married Layla Dern if things had gone differently, and I guess this is the justification for the change. As I understand it, the idea was to have Perrin murder someone important to him rather than kill some random White Cloaks in defense of himself, Iguain, and the wolves, but I am not sure this works. I certainly don't like Perrin better as a character in season 1 who casually murders somebody important to him rather than defends others against harm. This change basically leads to Perrin being traumatized to do much in the TV show. It also alters the path of his character. The show version of Perrin feels so guilty that he believes he deserves to be tortured by White Cloaks. This scene is supposed to be cathartic, but even that wouldn't bring Perrin out of his depression. Clearly there was time and reason for Perrin to have killed White Cloaks in this version of the story, so why did they have Perrin kill his wife? Presumably, it's to give the audience something to distinguish Perrin at the beginning of the story when there's a lot that's going on, and it's some kind of an obstacle to overcome that is more intrinsically tied to his later story arc with Faile, and maybe eventually the trial that he subjects himself to in the books. But it's not working for me. At least it's not working yet. This might be because I never really interpreted Perrin as being broken up about the white cloaks he kills in the books, and I don't know why this part of his character development should be connected to his romance plot. He does worry about his capacity for violence, but this has more to do with not wanting to turn into an animal than a philosophical objection to violence itself. Perrin believes in the use of force to defend the weak. At least the book version of Perrin does. The show has Perrin instead toy with the idea of becoming a pacifist after meeting the Tinkers, but it's not explained very well, and it doesn't lead to anything interesting. It's also the opposite of how Perrin feels about the Tinkers in the books. Tinkers won't even raise weapons to defend themselves against Shadowspawn. In the books, Perrin does not understand their philosophy, and I don't understand why the show writers thought a pacifist Perrin would be more attractive to audiences than a protective Perrin. Even if it does make sense to change Perrin's story arc to a conflict between pacifism and violence, using the death of his wife as a vehicle to explain why it's so important to him, why did the show make Layla the blacksmith? The objective should be to make Perrin interesting and likable, especially as Layla dies before speaking a single word of dialogue. Wouldn't it have been better to see Perrin, I don't know, forging something? In the show, Perrin is also shown to have feelings for Iguain, which are apparently strong enough to have caused strife in his marriage. This is possibly foreshadowing for the women troubles that Perrin has to deal with in the books. The problem I have with this retelling is that it makes Perrin look so bad. He loses Rand's trust as well as Layla's. It also implies that Perrin is the problem. What are the chances that something like this repeats for him? Does the show Perrin have a penchant for choosing jealous women? Does Perrin behave in overly familiar ways with women who are not his wife more than once? Are we going to get an unfaithful Perrin in this version of the story? Is this what Rafe thinks people love about Perrin? God, I hope not. Perrin is supposed to be faithful, like crazily, single-mindedly loyal to Fail, to the point that he will grind armies into dust and soak a battlefield in blood. The misunderstanding he gets into with his actual wife is one of the worst parts of the books, especially because it's unwarranted and seems to go on forever. Why are the showrunners leaning further into this? I guess the other option is that they cut the jealousy storyline from Perrin's arc, and we got it here with Iguain instead of later with Berylane? I don't know. At least Perrin gets wolf powers, but he doesn't understand them as no one explains them, so Perrin does nothing in the first season of the show except mope about how he might be a monster. He was useless compared to the women in the battle for Faldara. Perrin should have done something noteworthy in the last episode to show a meaningful arc for his character, but instead we just see him staring out over the battlefield in some distress. Perhaps he's rethinking his choices and will start afresh in season 2, but I don't know, is it too little too late? As an adaptation of the character in the books, Perrin gets at best a 2 out of 5. As a standalone character in the show, well, that's harder to judge as he only gets half a story arc and very little development, so I have to leave his character at a 2 out of 5. There's a potential to bump up for Perrin, but it's unclear whether this version of the character can ever become the version of Perrin that's in the books. I just can't see him realistically ever getting over what happened in that first episode. Matt Coffin. Matt Coffin is a childhood friend of Rand and Perrin. In the books, he's portrayed as a scamp, but one with heroic tendencies who always keeps his promises and puts his friend's well-being above his own, even if he'll never admit it. I would describe Matt's personality as mischievous, fun-loving, heroic, stubborn, and immature, at least initially. In the books, Matt is always looking out for himself. At least that's what he wants you to think. He wants to survive. He values freedom. He hates being put upon or controlled by anyone. He's also attracted to luxury and often idly prices people's jewels, clothes, and other displays of wealth. To Matt, the highest value that can be put on life is to be able to do exactly what he likes and be as comfortable as possible. In the back of his head, though, Matt has a thirst for glory and often will choose adventure and take a gamble with the chance to become heroic over safety, freedom, and wealth, the things he ostensibly values. When it comes to skills and abilities, Matt has quite a few, although it takes a few books to witness them all. Like Perrin and Rand, Matt is Taviran. He learns horse trading from his father, and he is competent with the quarterstaff and bow before he ever leaves Edmund's Field. He picks up knife throwing from Tom, and also learns to juggle in the first book. It's a shame that we don't see Matt use any of these abilities at any point in the show. Matt's greatest and most unique character trait, though, is his good luck. Matt's luck is tied to the pattern, not to the dagger from Shadar Logoth, as some people seem to think. In Book 3, Matt remembers having always been lucky, but his luck was noticeably stronger in Faldara and really ramps up when he is trapped in Tar Valon under the watchful eye of the Amyrlin seat. Matt figures out later that his luck is most effective when his odds of winning are randomized. Bad for games of stones or cards, but great for dice. However, there's also an element of risk involved in Matt's luck manifesting. Matt was never very lucky in Edmund's Field because he was never much at risk, but he has always been drawn to see the world. That's what the pattern had planned for him. When the odds are against Matt, with a high chance that he might be killed, the pattern twists in his favor. The worse the odds, the higher the danger, the harder the dice tumble in Matt's head. Matt also displays knowledge of his past lives in a manner that isn't supposed to be possible. These memories are seen as early as the first book. At times, Matt randomly speaks the Old Tongue. He also understands the Old Tongue. This happens before he goes through any of the stone doorways. This is evidence that Matt was once a lord of Menetherin, perhaps King Aemon himself, which they sing about in episode 2. Later, Matt is gifted with more memories that fill the holes that the dagger made. These memories get jumbled up in his mind, but also make him extremely formidable on the battlefield. Matt's arc in the beginning of the show is to stay alive, to see the world, and to be his own man. He also needs to overcome the curse of the Shadar Logoth dagger. In the show, Matt's introduction is extremely different from the books. He is nearly the opposite of who he's supposed to be. He is shown to have no luck, just a gambling addiction. He's poor, he's crass, he's rude, he's a cad where women are concerned, and he steals from his neighbors. Later in episode 1, we do get some nuance with Matt, showing that it's because his parents are terrible that he has a lot of these negative traits, but he cares for his little sisters, which is supposed to make him more likable to viewers. I still don't really understand the point of changing Matt's character so profoundly. I do understand the need to make him more memorable at the beginning of the story, as he really doesn't do that much in the first 2 books, but there was a lot of material to work with that the show did not use. Many readers don't get the point of Matt until he gets a string of point of view chapters in Book 3, and many more don't like him until after Rhuidean, when he is served a bit of comeuppance for his cheek, matures a bit, and gets a power upgrade. But the show doesn't choose to lean into the character very well, and it makes me wonder if these writers don't understand Matt. The trouble with Matt is that he is an unreliable narrator for his own motivations and also often misunderstood by other people who believe what he says about himself rather than observing what he actually does. Matt says he doesn't want to help anyone if it might cost him. He also does not want to be given any chores or responsibilities, or for other people to have any expectations of him. However, Matt does all the work that is assigned to him. He's not always respectful, but he is always responsible, and he will go to extreme lengths, straight into the jaws of darkness, to help anyone in need, all the while claiming he's no bloody hero and can't be relied upon at all. I wish I could give you examples of this characterization from the show, but there aren't any in season 1. Matt isn't shown to have any notable skills. He's a bit funny, and he shows some sympathy for his friends, but that's about it. It's unclear whether the showrunners don't care for Matt and are intending to go their own way with his character, or if they're laying the foundation for some kind of redemption arc. It's hard to say because there's such little development and no character growth for this character in the first season beyond becoming sick from the dagger and being easily healed by Moiraine. Overall, I'd give Matt's character on the show a 1 out of 5 as an adaptation. This has nothing to do with Barney Harris, who does a terrific job with the script he's given. If I try to completely remove my expectations for this character and mitigate the unexpected loss of the actor, I might see Matt earning as high as a 3 out of 5, mostly because the plotline with the dagger is interesting, and I do like Barney Harris's performance. However, he still doesn't really do anything very likable or heroic in season 1. Last, and possibly least for the TV show, we have Rand al'Thor. Rand is a man who can channel, which means he will go mad. He is supposed to learn that he is also the Dragon Reborn, which means he has limited time to bring about the prophecy, forge the nations together to fight the last battle, and face the Dark One. Rand gets a lot of character development in the book, so it's hard to pick just 5 words to describe him, but I'm going to go with responsible, chivalrous, forthright, clever, and stubborn. What makes Rand's story arc so tragic is what a wonderful person he is, or was, before his fate befalls him. Rand is a good son to Tam, a good boyfriend to Iguain, and an honorable friend. He likes to protect and do right by women in particular, although he does not look down upon women. He is straightforward, kind, and intelligent. He's also stubborn as a mule, but that's true for everyone from Edmund's Field. It's really easy to like Rand in the books, and it's easy to hurt for him too, because of just how hard it is for him to be the Dragon Reborn. Rand does not want to be controlled. He does not want to be a puppet of the Aes Sedai. To avoid accepting that he is the Dragon Reborn, Rand convinces himself the Aes Sedai are playing him and trying to use him for a false dragon. He never really relinquishes this paranoia. Rand does not want to go mad and kill the people he loves. He can't stand the idea of hurting women and children in particular. Rand knows he must face the Dark One, but he has no idea how to do it and does not trust what Moiraine and the other Aes Sedai tell him. He is not a natural politician. Being overly serious, he struggles with likability. Rand would like to survive, if he can. At least, he begins his journey with this intention, but starts to lose hope that survival is possible as the story progresses. The stakes for Rand are insane. It's what makes him compelling as a protagonist. When it comes to skills and abilities, Rand is strongly Ta'veren, which means he has the pattern on his side as long as he can walk in the light. However, the pressures of being the Dragon Reborn and the taint on the power gradually grind Rand down. In Edmund's Field, Rand was a sheep herder. This is surprisingly relevant, as Rand has to do a lot of people herding. However, there is a difference between sheep herding and shepherding, and under the strain of being the Dragon Reborn, Rand actually forgets which of these is more effective. When it comes to weapons, Rand is quite skilled. He knows the bow before he leaves Edmund's Field, and he learns the sword from Lan. His heron-marked blade is a sign of a blade's master, although it takes him a few books to earn this mark. Rand can channel, and strongly. He learns to do things instinctively, and then studies them later. He's also clever at devising new ways of working with the One Power. Rand has some help in that he retains some of the memories of his past life as Lews Therin Telamon. Rand's arc in the books is to go from being a shepherd from the Two Rivers to being the Chosen One. This means that he has to come to grips with the fact that he will go channel and that he will go mad, and he has to accept that he is the Dragon Reborn and must defeat the Dark One before he goes mad. In the show, a lot of attention is spent showing that Rand does not trust Moiraine, which emphasizes his paranoia but not his better qualities. However, our introduction to Rand in the TV show is great. I really like the scene with Rand coming down the mountainside with Tam. They show Rand being helpful, making the path easier for Tam and the cart. They mention him gathering flowers for Iguain and being a sap. This is good character work. But the device of keeping the Dragon Reborn a mystery results in Rand taking a backseat to other characters in the show for most of the season. A lot of the development we do get for him is centered on his relationship with Iguain. The show really puts a lot of emphasis on their relationship. I even saw a tweet from Amazon Prime including them in a poll for One True pairings. But, spoiler, Rand and Iguain don't make it. their relationship goes nowhere. They even technically break up in episode 1 of the show. That's what that scene in the mountain was about. And the rest of the season just plods along through all the negative feelings, bargaining, and grief that goes with splitting up from a person you thought you were going to marry. This B-plot isn't bad, it's got some literary merit and allows the show to give us some character development for Rand without explicitly telling us he is the Dragon Reborn, since we're supposed to think that Iguain is, I guess. But it doesn't work that well. Rand has to carry the story from the moment he is revealed to be the actual Dragon Reborn. To do this, he needs to be someone the audience likes. Unfortunately, we aren't shown that Rand can do much beyond being a really good boyfriend and really objectionable to everything that Moiraine does. He doesn't even learn to use a sword. He doesn't demonstrate any cleverness. At the end of the season, his quote-unquote fight with the Dark One pales in comparison to anything the female channelers do, especially Nynaeve. How is anyone supposed to root for this guy? My concern is that Rand is not ever going to become our main character. We might get the whole story of the Wheel of Time told as a jigsaw through an ensemble cast. More of Rand's wins in the books might be divided amongst other characters. We might just observe and react to Rand the way the world observes and reacts to him in the books, which will make it very difficult to like him and to relate to. This worries me. This, more than anything else, would subvert the core message of the Wheel of Time book series. I want to cover the messaging and themes in more detail, but I'm going to have to do that in a separate video because we are way over time. To wrap up this review of the characters, let me add this. If it's not clear, I like all the characters in the books. When I say I like them, I don't mean I would be friends with them all. I like characters that are defined and behave in realistic and interesting ways, even if they are bad people. In this light, the characterizations for the television show are not bad. All the actors are portraying people that have defined personalities. I don't like all the changes that were made, especially to Matt and Perrin, and I don't like that all the boys are sidelined as characters in season 1 who don't do all that much. But it is possible that these characters can evolve into who they are in the books in later seasons. Alternatively, the story might go in another direction with them, which could be a good story, or could be even more disappointing. We'll have to wait and see. The real challenge of season 1 is the plot and the messages. But again, because we are out of time, like way over time, we'll have to cover that in another video. So when I started recording this video, I thought I was going to be able to fit both characters and plot into one video, but I'm not gonna be able to do that. I had way too much to say about the characters, even though I only covered 7 characters and quite a few more are introduced in the TV show for the Wheel of Time. We are going to pause here and I'm going to enjoy New Year's Eve. I'm gonna eat some dinner, watch some television, open some champagne, and in the new year, I will work on segments 2 and 3 of what was supposed to be one video. If you enjoyed this segment, please let me know. I have no idea how the transition from the camera looking at me to going over visuals is coming across. So let me know if you like this, if you didn't like this, and I will adjust for future videos. I would also just love more comments in general about whether you agree, whether you disagree, what you're looking forward to, and what makes you apprehensive when it comes to how these characters have been changed for the series moving forward. I would also love, of course, more subscriptions and more likes. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, please subscribe, please share, and until next time, say goodbye, Fritz. Say Happy New Year.